The galaxy had been quiet for a very long time, not the quiet of empty space, where nothing lived and nothing moved. This was a different kind of quiet. It was the silence of a billion voices that had forgotten how to shout. It was the stillness of a trillion hearts that no longer knew how to race with excitement or burn with desire. For 1,200 years, the Galactic Concordance had maintained what they called the Great Peace. Every species on every world lived in harmony. There were no wars. There were no conflicts. Neighbors did not fight with neighbors. Nations did not rise against nations. It was, by every measure that the Concordance used, a perfect civilization. The secret to this peace was simple. 12 ancient stations floated in the darkness between stars. They had been built long ago by a species called the Architects, who had vanished from the galaxy before any living species could remember. These stations hummed with a strange energy. They sent out a signal that touched every mind in the galaxy. This signal was called the dampening field. The Concordance told its citizens that the dampening field removed the desire for violence. It took away the urge to hurt others. It made beings kind and gentle and satisfied with what they had. The history book said this was a gift from the Architects, a final blessing to help younger species avoid destroying themselves. No one questioned this story. No one had the desire to question anything at all. Station 07 drifted in the outer reaches of the Volan expanse, far from any inhabited world. It was small compared to the other 11 stations. Its systems were old and had not been maintained in over a century. The Concordance had decided 117 years ago that the station was too far away to be worth the trouble of sending repair crews. It worked well enough. That was good enough. The station floated alone in the dark, doing its small part to keep the galaxy peaceful and still and quiet. Then the humans came. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 40 years before. They were newcomers, outsiders. They had burst onto the scene with their loud voices and their strange questions and their uncomfortable habit of wanting things. The elder species found them exhausting. Humans always wanted to go somewhere. They always wanted to build something. They always wanted to know why. The other species had learned, long ago, to stop asking why. The salvage ship Meridian was not supposed to be in the Velen expanse. Its captain, a woman named Lin Chun, had taken a contract to recover a lost cargo vessel 3 sectors away. But their navigation system had malfunctioned, and they had drifted off course. And now they were in a part of space that humans had never visited before. Chief Engineer Mira Okonkwo sat at her console and watched the readings with tired eyes. She was a tall woman with dark skin and short gray hair. She had been an engineer for 30 years, first on Earth, then on Luna Station, and now on whatever ship would hire her. She had seen many strange things in her life. She thought she had seen everything. Then she saw the signal from Station 07. The energy patterns were unlike anything in human databases. The frequency was wrong. The wavelength was impossible. Every instrument on the Meridian told her that what she was seeing could not exist. And yet there it was, pulsing in the darkness like a heartbeat. Mira sent a request to the Concordance archives. She asked for any information about the signal, about the station, about the architects who had built it. The response came 3 hours later. It was polite and formal and completely useless. The message thanked her for her interest and suggested she continue on her way. Myra frowned at the screen. In her experience, when someone told you not to look at something, that was exactly when you should look harder. She went to Captain Chen with her findings. Chen was a practical woman who had learned long ago that trouble usually followed curiosity. She listened to Myra's report. She looked at the readings. She thought about the Concordance's warning. Then she looked at Myra's face and saw something she recognized. It was the look of a person who needed to know. It was the look that had driven humanity to cross oceans and climb mountains and reach for the stars. It was the look that the elder species had somehow lost. Chum sighed. She knew she should turn the ship around and forget about the strange station. She knew that was the safe choice, the smart choice. But Chun was human, and humans had never been very good at making safe choices. The Meridian changed course towards Station 07. Within an hour, they received 3 warnings from Concordance Traffic Control. The messages were calm and reasonable. They explained that the station was restricted. They suggested, in gentle words, that the humans should go somewhere else. Myra read the warnings and felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she had known all her life, but had never been able to name. It was the feeling of being told no and wanting to say yes. It was the feeling of a locked door and the key that might open it. She did not know it yet, but that feeling was the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. It was the thing that the dampening field was meant to destroy. It was the spark that the architects had tried to control, and that the Concordance had learned to fear. It was the simple, terrible, beautiful human need to know what came next. The Meridian continued toward the station. The warnings stopped. The silence of space wrapped around them like a blanket. Mira stood at the observation window and watched the station grow larger. It was shaped like a flower made of metal, with long petals reaching out into the void. Lights flickered along its surface, dim and irregular, like the last breaths of a dying fire. She did not know what she would find inside. She did not know that her discovery would change the galaxy forever. She did not know that she would become both a hero and a villain, depending on who was telling the story. All she knew was that something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a very long time, and she was going to find out what it was. The Meridian docked with Station 07. The airlock opened with a hiss of ancient air. Myra stepped inside, and the quiet began to crack. The inside of Station 07 was wrong. Myra felt it the moment she stepped through the airlock. The corridors curved in directions that hurt her eyes. The walls seemed to shift when she was not looking directly at them. The floor beneath her boots felt solid, but some part of her brain kept insisting that she was falling. She had explored many abandoned stations in her career. Old mining platforms, crashed warships, research facilities that had been left to rot in the void. They all had a certain feeling to them, a sense of emptiness, a memory of the people who had once lived there. This station felt like it had never been built for people at all. The rest of the Meridian crew stayed near the airlock. Captain Chun had sent 2 security officers with Myra, but they stopped after the first 100 meters. Their faces had gone pale. Their hands were shaking. One of them, a young man named Torres, said he could hear something whispering just beyond the edge of his hearing. Myra told them to wait. She continued alone. The architecture grew stranger as she moved deeper into the station. The architects had not thought like humans. They had not thought like any species Myra had ever studied. Their designs followed rules that she could not understand. Doorways opened into rooms that should not have fit in the available space. Staircases led up and down at the same time, but Myra was an engineer. She did not need to understand the rules to see the patterns. And the patterns told her something important. The station had been changed. She could see it in the way the walls joined together, in the places where new metal had been welded over old, in the cables and conduits that ran through the corridors like veins, carrying power to systems that had not been part of the original design. Someone had taken the architect's creation and twisted it into something else. At the heart of the station, Myra found the control nexus. It was a vast chamber, bigger than the cargo hold of any ship she had ever served on. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above her head. In the center of the room stood a crystalline structure that pulsed with dim light. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. It was also sick. She could feel its wrongness like heat from a fever. Mira approached the crystal slowly. Her instruments went wild. Energy readings spiked and dropped. Frequencies shifted faster than her equipment could track. But beneath all the noise, she could see the truth. The system was operating at 3% efficiency. 3%. Whatever the architects had built this for, whatever purpose it was meant to serve, it was barely functioning. It was like finding a starship engine being used to power a lamp. It was waste on a scale that made her want to scream. She found the control interface after an hour of searching. It was hidden behind a panel that had been welded shut. The metal was newer than the rest of the station. The welds were rough and hasty, the work of someone who had wanted to hide what lay beneath. Mira cut through the panel with her torch. Behind it, she found screens covered in symbols she did not recognize. But she also found something she did recognize: numbers. Mathematics was the one language that all species shared. And these numbers told a story. It took her 3 days to decode enough to understand. She barely slept. She barely ate. The crew brought her food and water and worried looks, but she could not stop. The truth was there, waiting in the data, and she needed to find it. On the third night, she finally understood. An understanding broke something inside her. The dampening field was not a gift. It was not a blessing from the wise architects to their younger siblings. It was not even a weapon, not in the way Myra had started to fear. It was a cage. The original station had been built to contain something. The architects had created a prison for a threat that the records did not name. The crystal at the heart of the station was meant to project a barrier, to hold something terrible in place while the architects found a way to destroy it. But the architects had vanished. And the species that came after them had found the stations drifting empty in the void. They had studied the technology. They had learned to use it. And they had made a choice that changed the galaxy forever. They had turned the bars of the cage inward. The dampening field did not just remove aggression. It did not just take away the desire for violence. It removed everything: ambition, curiosity, the drive to explore and discover and create. The fundamental spark that pushed beings to reach beyond their limits. The great peace was not peace at all. It was surrender. It was death dressed in comfortable clothes. Myra sat in the control nexus and felt tears running down her face. She thought about all the species she had met since humanity joined the galactic community. The Korthari, who had once been famous explorers, but now spent their days tending gardens. The Malori, whose merchant fleets had once crossed the galaxy, but now rarely left their home system. The Pelians, whose art had moved civilizations to tears, but who had not created anything new in 400 years. They had all been prisoners. They had all been asleep. And none of them had known. Then Myra thought about humanity. 40 years in the Concordance. 40 years under the dampening field. It was not long enough. The signal had touched them, had begun to quiet the fire in their hearts, but it had not finished the job. That was why humans still asked questions. That was why they still pushed and reached and wanted. They were the only species in the galaxy that still remembered what it felt like to burn. But in another 100 years, they would forget too. Their children would be quieter. Their grandchildren would be still. The fire would go out, one generation at a time, until humanity was just like everyone else. Until the whole galaxy was peaceful and empty. And dead. Mira looked at the control interface. The original architect systems were still there, buried beneath the modifications. She could see them now, could read their purpose in the mathematics. The cage could be restored to its original function. The bars could be turned outward again. She could wake the galaxy up. Her hands were shaking as she began to work. Mira gathered the crew of the Meridian in the ship's common room. There were 12 of them, including Captain Chen. They sat around the table and looked at her with curious eyes. Some of them looked worried. Others looked excited. None of them understood what she was about to tell them. She told them everything. She told them about the architects and their prison. She told them about the species that came after, who found the stations and learned their secrets. She told them about the choice those ancient beings had made, to turn the cage inward, to trap every mind in the galaxy inside walls of forced peace. She told them what the dampening field really did. How it stole not just violence, but everything that made life worth living. How it had turned a galaxy of dreamers into a galaxy of sleepers. How every species, except for humans, had been robbed of their fire. She told them that humanity was running out of time. That in a few more generations, they would be just like everyone else. Quiet, content, empty. When she finished, no one spoke for a long time. Torres, the young security officer who had been afraid in the corridors, was the first to break the silence. His voice was shaky, but his words were clear. "What can we do about it?" Myra explained. She could modify this station. She could restore it to something close to its original function. She could not shut down the entire dampening field, because that would require access to all 12 stations. But she could create a gap, a hole in the cage, a place where the signal did not reach. The effect would spread slowly. Species within range of this station would begin to wake up. They would remember what it felt like to want things, to dream, to reach. The change would ripple outward, and eventually it would touch the whole galaxy. And then what? Captain Chun asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. What happens when all these species wake up and remember how to hate each other? Mira did not have a good answer for that dot. The debate lasted 18 hours. Some of the crew wanted to leave immediately. They wanted to report the station to the Concordance, tell them about the malfunction in the system, and let the proper authorities handle it. They argued that it was not their place to make decisions for the entire galaxy. They argued that peace, even forced peace, was better than war. Others wanted to destroy the station completely. If the dampening field was a cage, they said, then every station was a bar. Remove one bar and the cage was weaker. Destroy all 12 and the galaxy would be free. They argued that no one had the right to imprison trillions of minds, no matter how good the intentions. And some, like Myra, wanted to flip the switch. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rough from exhaustion and emotion. "The Concordance knows. They have to know. This system has been running for over 1,000 years. Someone maintains it. Someone keeps it working. They are not going to let us destroy it. They are not going to let us tell the truth." She looked around the table at the faces of her crewmates. Some of them she had known for years. Others she had met only months ago. But they were all human. They all still had the fire in their hearts, even if they did not know it. If we leave now, nothing changes. The Concordance will send a repair team. They will fix whatever we broke. They will make sure the cage stays strong. And in 100 years, our grandchildren will look up at the stars and feel nothing. They will not even know what they lost. Torres spoke again. But if we wake them up, people will get hurt. There will be wars. There will be violence. We cannot just decide that for everyone. They decided for us, Myra replied. 1,000 years ago, someone decided that the galaxy was better off asleep. They did not ask. They did not vote. They just did it. And every species since then has been living in a dream, thinking it was real. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the station floated in the darkness, its lights flickering like dying stars. I know people will get hurt. I know there will be chaos. I know some species will make terrible choices when they wake up. But at least they will be making choices. At least they will be alive. Captain Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up. "We vote," she said. "This is too big for one person to decide. We vote, and whatever the majority says, we do it. No arguments. No second chances." The vote was not unanimous. 3 crew members voted to leave and report to the Concordance. 2 voted to try to destroy the station. 7 voted to flip the switch. 7 was enough. Mira returned to the control nexus. The crystal still pulsed with its sick light. The interface still showed its incomprehensible symbols and its very comprehensible mathematics. She had spent 3 days learning how the system worked. She knew exactly what to do. Her hands were steady as she made the final modifications. She rerouted power from the corrupted systems to the original architect design. She disabled the safety protocols that the ancient species had installed to keep the cage stable. She prepared the station to do what it had always been meant to do. When everything was ready, she stood before the main console. A single switch glowed in front of her. 117 years of quiet. Trillions of sleeping minds. The fate of the galaxy. She thought about her mother, who had died still believing in the dream of reaching distant stars. She thought about her father, who had taught her that every locked door was just a puzzle waiting to be solved. She thought about all the humans who had come before her, who had crossed oceans and climbed mountains and walked on the moon because they could not accept being told no. She thought about what it meant to be human, to want, to reach, to burn. Myra pressed the switch. The crystal flared with light. The station shuddered, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the cage began to crack. The change did not happen all at once. It started slowly, like the first light of dawn after a long night. The signal from Station 07 rippled outward at the speed of thought, touching minds that had been quiet for generations. Most beings did not even notice at first. They went about their daily lives, tending their gardens and watching their screens and doing the same things they had always done. But something was different. On Velen Prime, in a small apartment overlooking a peaceful city, a Core-3 mathematician named Salaith looked up from her work. She had been studying the same equations for 40 years. They were elegant and beautiful and completely pointless. She had always known they were pointless in a distant way, but she had never minded. Now, suddenly, she minded. She stared at the equations on her screen and felt something stir in her chest. It was uncomfortable, like an itch she could not scratch. She wanted them to mean something. She wanted her work to matter. She wanted to discover something new, something that had never been found before, for the first time in her adult life. Salaith wanted, on the trade moon of Jissen 4, a Melari merchant named Kavos stood in his small shop and watched the customers walk past. He had owned this shop for 200 years. He sold the same things every day to the same kinds of people. It was a good life, a quiet life, a life that suddenly felt like a cage. Kavos closed his shop early that day. He went to the docking bay and looked at the ships coming and going. He watched them rise into the sky and disappear into the stars. And he remembered something he had not thought about since he was a child. He remembered wanting to see what was out there. In the halls of the Concordant Senate, something even stranger was happening. The representatives of 1,000 species sat in their ancient chamber, discussing the matters of the day. They had done this for centuries. They always agreed in the end. They always found compromise. They always kept the peace. Today, Representative Vesh of the Tarani was speaking about trade regulations. His words were calm and reasonable, like they always were. But halfway through his speech, Representative Moth of the Kelani interrupted him. No one ever interrupted in the Senate. It was simply not done. "This is pointless," Moth said. Her voice was strange, like she was hearing it for the first time. "These regulations do not matter. Nothing we do here matters. We move numbers from one column to another and tell ourselves it means something. The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at each other with confused eyes. Some of them felt the same strange stirring that Moth felt. Others did not understand what was happening at all. Vesh tried to continue his speech, but the words would not come. He stood at the podium and realized, with growing horror, that he could not remember why any of this mattered. He could not remember why he had become a representative. In the first place, he could not remember ever wanting anything at all. The awakening spread like fire. Through dry grass dot, not everyone felt it at the same time. Some species were more affected than others. Some individuals woke up quickly, while their neighbors stayed asleep. But the change was happening, spreading across every world that fell within range of Station 0-7. And not all of it was good. On Corthery Prime, 2 nations that had been at peace for 800 years suddenly remembered an old insult. The details did not matter. What mattered was that they were angry, truly angry, for the first time in generations. Within a week, they were at war. On Jissen 4, merchants who had trusted each other for centuries began to cheat and steal. The Mallory had forgotten how to compete, and now they were learning again. Some of them learned faster than others. Some of them got hurt. In the Concordant Senate, the arguments grew louder every day. Representatives who had never raised their voices began to shout. Old alliances broke apart. New ones formed. The Great Peace was cracking, and no one knew how to hold it together. But there was also something else. Something that grew alongside the chaos. On Vellum Prime, Solith finished her new equations. They were different from anything she had done before. They were beautiful and difficult, and they pointed the way to a new kind of faster-than-light travel. When she published them, 12 other scientists contacted her within an hour. They wanted to work together. They wanted to build something. On Jissen 4, Kavo sold his shop and bought a ship. He gathered a crew of Mallory who felt the same restless hunger that he did. They set out for the uncharted sectors, the places no one had visited in 300 years. They did not know what they would find. That was the point. And in a small studio on Pelion 3, a composer named Thress sat down at her instrument for the first time in 400 years. She did not know what she was going to play. She did not have a plan or a purpose. She just knew that she needed to create something. The music that came out of her was unlike anything the Pelions had heard in living memory. It was raw and strange and imperfect. It was full of emotions that had been forbidden for so long that no one had words for them anymore. When she finished, Thress was crying. She did not know why, but for the first time in her long life, she felt alive. The galaxy was waking up. It was painful and messy and terrifying. Old wounds reopened. New conflicts began. Species that had lived in harmony learned to hate again, but they also learned to hope, to dream, to reach for things they could not yet see. The quiet was ending, and whatever came next, it would be loud. The Concordance fleet arrived at Station 07 30 days after. Mira pressed the switch. There were 50 warships in the formation. They were old vessels, built long ago for a purpose that had been forgotten. Most of them had never fired their weapons. Most of their crews had never even been in a fight. But they came anyway, because the Concordant Senate had ordered it. Admiral Vesh stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the station grow larger on his screens. He was Tarani, a species known for their calm nature and logical minds. For 300 years, he had served the Concordance faithfully. He had never questioned his orders. He had never wanted to. Now, he was not so sure. The awakening had touched him too. Not as strongly as some, but enough. Enough to make him wonder why he was really here. Enough to make him question what the Concordance was really protecting. His orders were clear. Arrest the crew of the Meridian. Restore Station 07 to its proper function. Make the galaxy quiet again. Simple orders. Easy to follow. Except that nothing felt simple anymore. The fleet slowed as it approached the station. And then Vesh saw something that made his heart stop. The station was not alone. 300 ships surrounded it. They were not warships. They were science vessels and trading ships and old passenger cruisers. They came from dozens of species, from worlds scattered across the affected zone. And they were all pointed at the Concordance fleet. Vesh opened a communication channel. "This is Admiral Vesh of the Concordance fleet. You are interfering with official business. Stand aside or face the consequences." The response came not from the gathered fleet, but from Station 07 itself. The voice was human, female, tired but unbroken. "Admiral, my name is Mira Okonkwo. I am the one who activated the station. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. But you will not restore the dampening field. Not today. Not ever." Vesh felt the old training take over. His voice became cold and official. "You have committed crimes against the Concordance. You have disrupted the Great Peace. Trillions of beings are suffering because of what you did. They are not suffering, Admiral. They are living. For the first time in 1,000 years, they are actually living." The 300 ships held their position. More were arriving every hour. Word had spread across the affected zone. The awakened remembered what had been taken from them, and they had come to make sure it was never taken again. Vesh studied the tactical display. His fleet was larger. His weapons were more powerful. He could push through the blockade if he really wanted to. But he would have to destroy hundreds of ships filled with beings who had never been in a battle before. Beings who were only here because they had remembered how to want things. Beings just like him. He opened a private channel to his senior officers. Assessment. Captain Yen, his second-in-command, spoke first. "We can break through, Admiral. It will be costly, but we have the firepower." "That is not what I asked." Silence on the channel. Then Yen spoke again, more quietly this time. "Sir, some of the crew. They're asking questions. They want to know why we are doing this. They want to know if the dampening field is really what the Senate says it is. And what do you tell them?" More silence. Then, "I do not have an answer, Admiral. I used to know all the answers. Now I am not sure I ever knew anything at all." Vesh closed the channel. He stood alone on his bridge and looked at the station that had broken the galaxy. He thought about his life. 300 years of service. 300 years of following orders without question. He had believed he was happy. He had believed he was content. But now, with the fog lifting from his mind, he could see the truth. He had never been happy. He had just been quiet. Myra's voice came over the channel again. "Admiral, I know you feel it. The awakening touched your fleet too. Your people are starting to remember what they lost. Are you really going to take that away from them again?" Vesh did not answer. He could not answer. Instead, he opened a channel to the gathered fleet. Not just his ships. All of them. Every vessel that floated in the shadow of Station 07. "This is Admiral Vesh. I want everyone to hear what I am about to say." He took a breath. The old calm tried to settle over him, but it would not hold anymore. The fire was coming back, and he did not want to stop it. For 1,000 years, the Concordance has told us that peace is the greatest good. That safety is worth any price. That it is better to be quiet than to be alive. I believed it. I taught it. I never questioned it. He paused. Somewhere behind him, a crew member made a small sound. It might have been a sob. I was wrong. We were all wrong. The Great Peace was never peace at all. It was a prison. And we were so deep in the darkness that we forgot what light looked like. On every ship, beings listened. Some of them were angry. Some were confused. Some were starting to understand. I will not restore the dampening field. I will not put the chains back on. The Senate can find another admiral to do their work. I am done being a jailer. He turned off the channel. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the ships of the Concordance fleet began to move. Not toward the station. Away from it. They turned and drifted, their weapons powering down. Their crews watching through viewports as they left the prison behind Dot in the control nexus of Station 07. Myra Okonkwo sat down on the cold floor and cried. 50 years later. They called it the rekindling. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Wars had been fought and ended. Alliances had formed and fallen apart. Art and science flourished in ways not seen since the time of the architects. A new faster-than-light drive, based on Salathes equations, allowed ships to cross the galaxy in days instead of years. Expeditions reached the edges of known space and found wonders no one had imagined. It had not been easy. The awakening had brought pain as well as hope. Many beings had not survived the transition. Many more carried scars that would never fully heal. But they were alive. They were truly, genuinely alive. Myra Okonkwo, old now and tired, gave her final interview from the observation deck of the station that bore her name. She watched a fleet of exploration vessels depart for the galactic rim. 15 species working together, reaching for the unknown. The interviewer asked if she regretted what she had done. Every day, she said, I carry every life that was lost because of my choice. Every war, every conflict, every death. She smiled, and her old eyes reflected the light of distant engines. But I also carry the music, and the discoveries, and the children who grow up knowing they can want things, knowing they can dream. The interviewer asked what she thought the future held. Myra laughed. It was a good laugh, full of warmth and wonder. I have absolutely no idea, she said. And that is the most beautiful thing I have ever felt. The ships disappeared into the stars. The galaxy hummed with life and noise and beautiful chaos. The quiet was over. And humanity had shown them all how to be loud again.